Welcome to the world of scale modeling with Mike Ashe, where techniques, tips, and creativity come alive with dozens of tutorials, projects, tape-up reviews, and picture references to help you build better scale models and enjoy our wonderful hobby. Welcome to part 1 of building the AMT 148 scale B-26 Marauder. This kit was originally issued way back in the 1980s, at about the same time the old Monogram company issued their 148 scale B-26 Marauder. The ESCI ERTL company has reissued this kit several times over the years, and you can still find it on eBay at a pretty good price. And with that short history, let's get started building this kit. We're going to have to add a lot of weight to the forward part of the fuselage to get this kit to sit correctly. So the first step is to reinforce the wings. Here I'm using 0.03 inch thick and 0.04 inch thick strips of evergreen strip stock in order to reinforce the wings to prevent flexing. I flattened the gluing surfaces to get a tight fit and used a lot of masking tape to secure the wing halves tightly together. I then ran beads of superglue along the seam lines, and the capillary action of the glue pulled it into the seams. This is the same gluing technique I used to build my Revell 148 scale B-25J. Each seam line was scraped, sanded, and checked with tester silver paint. Additional applications of superglue were applied in areas that needed attention. Once I was satisfied with the seam work, the silver paint was removed. Once I was done working on the wing assemblies, I turned my attention to the engine nacelles. The kit has the aft bulkheads for the engine nacelles, so here I added a little more detail by drilling out the framing. I added plastic strips to the back sides of the engine exhaust so that I could drill them out and make the exhaust ports deeper. After gluing the engine nacelles together, I added lengths of plastic strip to the interior areas of the seams to strengthen them. I used tiny strips of plastic to fill the voids along the seam lines wherever possible. This also adds strength to each gluing seam line. In this photo, you can see the attention to assembly techniques necessary to ensure strong sub-assemblies. Add as much plastic as you need along the seam lines to get a stronger bond. Fit checks during your assembly sequence are necessary as you finish sub-assemblies. I made notes on the instruction sheet on where the voids were and how best to fill them. Both engine nacelle sub-assemblies are now complete with the addition of the interior bulkheads. When I test fitted the engine nacelles, I noticed that the top front tips were molded too far inward. Using flat nose pliers, I carefully bent the tips slightly outward, checking my work as I progressed, and form-fitted the bends into place. The port side nacelle had a few voids, but the upper and lower surfaces were different diameters. This required careful sanding so that the plastic wouldn't get too thin. I also filled the voids with strips of evergreen strip stock that I superglued into place. The starboard wing had a lot of voids to fill in between the engine nacelle and the wing. Various sizes of plastic strip were used. I positioned all the plastic strips in place and then applied superglue on both sides of the strips. Once the superglue had dried, I carefully trimmed the plastic strips as close to the surface as I could, added more superglue, and then sanded the surfaces smooth. Filling and sanding the engine nacelle voids on the underside of the wings required using sandpaper wrapped around balsa strips. I also wet sanded to help reduce the surface indentations along the seam lines. The backside of each nacelle also had some voids in difficult places, and the best way to fill them was with plastic strips. Checking the seams with silver paint and then applying more superglue to areas that needed attention was the best way to get the seams to disappear. It took several iterations to complete the seam work. The seam work and fit issues on each side of each engine nacelle were different. However, bending out the upper outer areas of each nacelle greatly helped the fit issues at these compound curve areas. Here you can see the smooth transition area between the engine nacelle and the wing. The wing lights on both wings were just holes, so I boxed them in with plastic strip. I trimmed the plastic and then sanded the sides down until they were flush with the wing surfaces. Next, I worked on the engine cowlings. I shaved the gluing surfaces of the air intakes a little at a time and form-fitted them into place onto the cowlings so there would not be any voids. I ran tiny beads of super glue along the seam lines between the engine cowlings and the air intakes. I also reduced the thickness of the air intake openings so they looked a little bit more realistic. I then taped the wings and the tail assemblies and the landing gear in place to determine how much weight I would need to get the model to sit correctly. Here you can clearly see it's going to take a lot of lead weight to put inside the forward part of the fuselage. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for part 2, where we work on the interior, glue up the fuselage, attach the wings, and then work on detailing the engines and the landing gear. Happy scale modeling! Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up. And when you get the chance, visit our website at www.mikeashley.com, where you're going to find dozens of free PDF downloads, including tutorials, picture references, model galleries, projects, and my 5 original scale modeling books. Thanks to Ben Sound and Videvo for the royalty-free music, and happy scale modeling!